Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on your time zone. Thanks for joining World Bank Group President Ajay Banga's Spring Meetings press conference. If you need interpretation services, you can see an interpretation globe icon. Click on that if you want to listen in another language. I'm David Tice, the World Bank's press secretary, and this conference is on the record. But please note, to accommodate different time zones, we're going to embargo the call, all contents until 8 a.m. DC time tomorrow, Friday, April 12. That is 1200 UTC. Ajay will give opening remarks, and then we will turn to your questions. To ask a question, please use the raise hand function. We hope to get it to as many as possible, but of course, we're under time constraints. So if I can ask just to please keep to one question and identify yourself and your outlet. Thanks. Ajay, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm looking forward to welcoming each of you to our headquarters next week for our 2024 spring meetings. As you can, there are three things I'd like to cover with you this morning. First, touch upon why we pursued an evolution and reform agenda. Second, provide an update on the ground that we've covered over this period and the concrete changes we've made to what we're doing at the bank. And third, outline how these improvements will be on full display next week, and I think how they enable the World Bank Group to be more ambitious and deliver more than ever. So firstly, why have we undertaken this evolution agenda? And put simply, it's greater scale, greater impact. So the question is, why that? I think the first point is the world is facing a set of intertwined challenges. There's the climate crisis, debt, food insecurity, pandemics, fragility, and there is clearly a need to accelerate access to clean air, water, and energy. But we cannot tackle poverty without this broader view, and hence our early step to widen the aperture of the bank with a fit-for-purpose mission and a vision, and that is to create a world free from poverty on a livable planet. Second, scarce resources. And nearly all estimates make clear that adequate progress requires trillions annually. And third, the urgency, time is of the essence. So to illustrate one point on that, in the next 10 years, 1.1 billion young people across the global south will become working age adults. But in the same period and the same countries, we are currently expected to create 325 million jobs. We need a better bank to address all these challenges, but also a better bank for the challenges of tomorrow. So second, what have we done and what's next? The G20 leaders challenged the World Bank Group to change and to be a bigger part of the solution. They gave us a roadmap to evolve, an ambition for speed, simplicity, better leveraging our balance sheet, by engaging partners and the private sector. So we kind of took that roadmap and followed it diligently. The senior leadership in the bank have all pursued different elements of that roadmap. We've kind of worked across the institution to implement each of these. There were 30 recommendations from the G20 expert group. We are in the process of implementing the 27 of those that apply to this institution and get that behind us. So let's talk about speed. Building a faster, quicker bank. A few months ago, the average World Bank project approval process took 19 months. That's far too long. So our stated goal is we're going to reduce the approval time by 1/3 by the middle of next year. Now we're about halfway to that goal. We've knocked off about 3 months out of those 6 odd months we need to do, but there's clearly more to come. Simplicity. Speed and simplicity go hand in hand, and I think we want to be a better partner to governments, to the private sector, and therefore ultimately the people we serve. Now we're doing this across many work streams. I'm going to touch on those in a bit, but let me give you one example. Starting the 1st of July this year, IBRD, IDA, IFC, MIGA, all these 4 parts of the World Bank Group will have a single World Bank Group joint country representative in 20 countries. One unified leadership will make it much easier for our clients, governments, to access financing and expertise from the bank rather than have to go to different windows. Now let's talk about the capital adequacy of what we're trying to do with our balance sheet. In April a year ago, we squeezed $40 billion over 10 years from our balance sheet by adjusting our loan to equity ratio. And since then, We have launched a portfolio guarantee mechanism, launched a hybrid capital instrument, and these new tools will enable us to take more risks, boost our lending capacity further, all while preserving our AAA rating. Donors and shareholders have met this work with a degree of enthusiasm and generosity. Next we're going to celebrate that progress with some of them. Now, what makes these tools unique and a good investment is their ability to leverage every dollar we receive 6 to 8 times over the coming decade. But we've gone a little further than what even the Evolution Roadmap had asked. And last week, we began offering 50-year financing through IBRD at no additional cost for projects that provide cross-border benefits, creating an incentive system for countries to invest in such a project. We created a system to reduce interest rates for projects that address global challenges. Now, to fund these incentives and more, we've announced a Livable Planet Fund that can be funded by governments, but also by philanthropies. And we're now working to raise contributions to that fund. Now, all these instruments, what they do is they help us support the ambitions of middle-income countries, but we must do all we can to lift up lower-income countries. IDA is the largest source of concessional financing for lower-income countries. It is a safe repository for funds to be leveraged to transform development in those countries that need it the most. Now, we're doing this in 2 ways with a very serious IDA replenishment campaign effort. As you know, the IDA replenishment is coming up at the end of this year. So first, we're doing our part to support the G20 leaders' call for an ambitious IDA replenishment. And second, we're trying to simplify IDA to be more user-friendly for countries who already are wrestling with capacity challenges. And so to make it easier and simpler, but also to get an ambitious replenishment on the ground, that's our effort. So faster, simpler, more effective, more efficient. But we can't do it. Sorry, give me a minute here. Yeah, we can't do it alone. Over the last several months, we have worked among and across multilateral development groups to deepen and amplify our ability to make change happen. We have new bilateral partnerships with the Inter-American Development Bank, with the Islamic Development Bank, and by the end of next week, we will have 2 more announced. And across the MDBs, we have a working group that is working through a plan to first work with credit rating agencies to help improve their understanding of our work and our risks. They are integral to unlocking the full potential of callable capital. Second, very soon, we will announce a new co-financing platform that I think can be a game changer for clients and for the MDBs to work together. Third, we are standardizing our processes, such as procurement. I think that'll help to save clients time and money. And finally, we're continuing to develop a new approach to track climate outcomes based on impact. And I think next week, during the spring meetings, you're going to get an update on that work Friday next week. But we know that governments and multilateral institutions and philanthropies all working together will still fall short of providing the trillions that we will require annually for climate, for fragility, for inequality in the world. We therefore need the private sector. And in June, we launched the Private Sector Investment Lab and recruited 15 CEOs across asset management companies, banks, as well as operators to identify barriers and potential solutions to investment in the emerging markets. And 4 areas of focus have emerged from that group. The first is regulatory certainty. The second is political risk insurance. The third is foreign exchange risk. And the last one is helping to create an originate to distribute model. So we're working on each of these. And our work to break down silos within the bank is helping here. IBRD has expertise developing regulatory systems. We pair these capabilities with IFC's private sector knowledge. And I think we can help to bring about change to regulatory policies and drive confidence in these emerging markets. Additionally, this summer, we will launch a new guarantee platform that delivers simplicity, improved access, and faster payment execution. I think that puts us on a path to triple our annual guarantee issuances to $20 billion by 2030. And that compares to where we are today at 6 or 7. So over time, multiply our mobilization of private capital, many times. We're also working to find new approaches to address foreign exchange risk. And we're at the beginning of a years-long effort as well to build a securitization platform for the emerging markets, making it easier for institutional investors, pension funds and insurance companies and sovereign wealth funds to bring some portion of the $70 trillion they manage to these developing countries. But new financial instruments are just one piece of the puzzle. So last month, we started to publish our proprietary data as a global public good to try and inspire investor confidence. So we're doing this in 3 new ways. The first one is private sector recovery data by country income level is now published by a consortium of the development institutions. Second, the World Bank has published private sector default data broken down by credit rating. And lastly, we've actually released sovereign default and recovery rate statistics dating all the way back to 1985, something that we had to rebuild from our payment streams and data. But now that's ready and out there. So all this work contributes to one goal: getting more private sector capital into these developing economies to drive impact and to create jobs. So now let's talk about the Knowledge Bank. Knowledge. This has been part of the World Bank since the time we began. We are a funding bank, a money bank, but we're very much also a knowledge bank. And that's the idea, refocusing the World Bank, not just as a funding mechanism, but also as a knowledge mechanism. And by July 1, a new structure will be in place. You're going to see next week how we're already using this model to do some interesting, scalable, bigger things. So the model will have 5 pillars. People, which is health, education, social protection schemes. Prosperity, jobs, tax policy, economic policy, financial inclusion, small businesses, all that. Planet, air, water, soil health, biodiversity, forests, and of course, adaptation and mitigation. Infrastructure, roads, bridges, energy. Digital, because that is transforming our world and actually makes everything else feasible and possible. So across these 5 verticals, holding our feet to the fire, we will measure our impact on gender equality, on jobs for young people, and climate impacts. It's also a change in how we will work, but it's anchored in the hard-earned expertise that some outstanding World Bank Group staff throughout the world deploy to help countries develop. So what we're doing is bringing these experts to the forefront of our country-driven model and our country partnership frameworks, sitting with governments to craft a focused development plan that is a marriage of their ambition and our expertise. With that plan, our teams then work to create and cultivate bankable projects and implement them. If that requires capacity in the government, our Knowledge Bank team will partner with our people on the ground to help governments implement these projects. That's kind of the model that we're working through. Now, let's talk about the scorecard, because underpinning all of this, as I just mentioned, holding our feet to the fire, is accountability and focus. So you've followed our work to be more efficient and scale for impact. And a cornerstone of this is to incentivize output, not just input, ensuring that we focus not only on money out the door, but also on how many girls are in school, how many jobs are created, how many tons of carbon dioxide emissions are avoided, and how many private sector dollars are mobilized. So this new corporate scorecard, which we've just launched 2 days ago, and it's being kind of rebuilt from the ground up, and it'll take some time to get it all done to satisfaction. But we're pointing it towards outcomes and evidence, bringing it down from 153 items to 22 to focus the institution, help it work better as one unit to attack developmental challenges. That scorecard is our yardstick of accountability. It's a guidepost that our teams can rally around and work toward. It also allows our shareholders and taxpayers to clearly see the impact that we are making with the trust that they're placing in us by giving us their capital. So we've also implemented a series of changes that you won't see, but our clients and our partners will feel. These include reforms to business planning and budgeting processes, that fewer harmonized documents, and here are some results. We were able to shorten the strategic planning process from 9 to 3 months, developed one World Bank Group approach to it rather than one for each agency in the bank. Proper business planning for IBRD and IDA, we think this will allow us to redeploy $144 million of productivity savings to support priorities. We want to start the year every year looking for 5% productivity savings from our expenses. We've unified our approach to real estate. We're getting efficiency out of it, already saving $150 million for the year 23 and 24. So this is all part of the work that we're trying to do to get the plumbing of the bank to work even better. So now, what you're going to see next week and in the future, all this sort of adds up to a better functioning machine that we hope can take on bigger and more ambitious projects. We will be able to work seamlessly across the institution. We're trying to shepherd countries through that development journey, and we want to bring in the private sector investment, which we think can scale and help to create the right kind of prosperity. You've already seen a bit of this at COP28, where we committed 45% of our funds towards climate, with half of that for adaptation by 2025. We're working with partners to scale high-integrity carbon markets on forestry. We think that'll benefit people in the developing countries. We've embarked on an ambitious plan to tackle the harmful effects of methane emissions in 15 countries, more to come there. And we've launched a new program that we hope to bring clean, stable, affordable energy. At COP time, we announced 100 million Africans by 2030, putting a major dent in what we think is a key development hurdle. But next week, we're going to raise our ambition significantly on that plan for African energy. We will set a new horizon in our work on health. Each of these, both access to power in Africa and health, these require knowledge, private sector, speed, financing, including IDA and partners. So a better bank, bigger ambition, that's the game we're trying to play here. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to taking your questions.
Thank you. And again, to ask a question, please use the raise hand function. And I see from Politico, Zach Coleman. Zach, if you can ask your question, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you so much for doing this. And I have a climate-related question. Brazil is the chair of the G20, also will be hosting COP30 in 2025. How closely are you engaging with them on the COP part of their role, and what kind of interest have they taken in changing the bank or getting the bank to change its functions to help build that climate finance target in COP29 that will then feed into the national climate strategies that have to be filed in 2025?
So Brazil's a very active part of the dialogue we have. And as you know, in fact, in the G20, they've got a very big ambition in their presidency here to focus on poverty as well as hunger. But underlying all that is a growth plan for Brazil that starts from President Lula and Finance Minister Haddad's sort of ambition to use green growth as the way to turn the tide there. And you know, they've already made great progress on the rate of deforestation that was going on before President Lula took over. He's changed a lot of action there. So you'll find them engaging across the spectrum on climate, not just to do with mitigation or adaptation, but also to do with soil, to do with biodiversity, to do with nature. That is the nature of their ambition across their G20 presidency and then the upcoming COP that they're going to have a chance to work on. We're in regular dialogue with them. Actually, I'm going to be having another conversation with the finance minister, Mr. Haddad, on Monday. And then, of course, he's here for the spring meetings. So you'll get a chance to see him, and you'll be able to see his devotion to being a leader when that COP30 gets around.
Great, thank you. Next, I see a hand from Ana Rodriguez from El Tiempo. Ana, go ahead.
Yes, hello. What is the Latin American role in the new bank process?
Well, Latin America remains a very important part of the World Bank's efforts in energy. And, there are a number of countries. I was talking about Brazil just now, but then there's Argentina that is currently going through a whole economic realignment. And just yesterday or day before yesterday, we released our view of Latin America's economic prospects. And some of those are challenging, but a large part of that is impacted by the circumstances of Argentina's correction. We also said that we are supportive of the direction of that economy, and we look forward to working closely with their leadership to help them as they go forward. We're doing work in Colombia and Uruguay. I was talking last time about a performance for results program that we've launched in Uruguay, where the Uruguayan government is very keen to see if they can exceed their nationally determined contributions for climate change. And we're working on them with methane. If they do, we will actually buy down the cost of their loans from us. And so it's a pay for results kind of structure with them. So we work in Latin America, not only with these countries, but also with a very strong partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank. And that's one of the first partnerships we announced when I joined, traveling with Elon. And we're focusing on 3 areas. And the first one has to do with raising money for the Amazonian bonds, so to say. Expertise we have in Treasury, which we can share with the countries there, but also with the Inter-American Development Bank. The second work is on climate resiliency in the Caribbean, which I think, as you know, we've announced a lot of efforts on climate resilient debt clauses, and those were aimed to help reduce the burden on countries that suffer from a catastrophe or a climate event of some type. And there's a number of Latin countries and Caribbean countries with whom we're working on these topics. And the third is to expand education and digital education in particular for girls in Latin America, trying to correct the learning gap that developed during COVID in a number of places in the world, but also in Latin America. So Latin America plays a very important role and is one of the interesting markets for us in our scope of work.
Thank you. And if we could next call on Eric Martin from Bloomberg. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much, Ajay. Wanted to ask you about some of the distressed debt situations around the world, particularly what you're seeing in terms of the latest signs of the common framework, and if Zambia is representing a breakthrough or something that can be carried forward into other cases with the deal with the Eurobond holders. And also to ask you more broadly beyond China debt relief about China's economy and your recent visit over there, and whether you expect the issue of overcapacity to come up in the meeting. So this is something that certainly Secretary Yellen has pressed the Chinese on. Bruno Le Maire of France has also mentioned, and to what extent we could expect that issue to be brought forward, and if it's affecting emerging and developing countries that are looking to create their own industry in areas where China is dominant.
Hey, Eric, thank you. Your first part of the question on debt. So, it's interesting that the G20 Common Framework, as you know, had 4 countries going through it. And there's Zambia, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Chad. And since the time they entered the Common Framework, the World Bank has given them $16 billion, $18 billion of money over this period, of which, by the way, about half is net positive. And also, by the way, about half is grants, fully grants, and the rest is deeply concessional. So what are the roles the bank plays during the debt system? Because in the IMF leads, but we are very closely with them on this whole framework, is that we play the role of ensuring that net positive flows and grants more than anything else continue to flow into these countries. So that allows them to have the lifeline they need as they work their way through the process. As you know, some of the countries took much longer to go through the process. But as we're going along, this is getting better and faster. The biggest challenge here is transparency of information. And I think there a lot of progress has been made over the last few years. Zambia has gone through a process of getting first the public debt agreed to and now the private sector work. And so, yes, Zambia could be a great sign of hope as we move forward. But our task is to get any other country that needs the assistance to come through this, either through that common framework or through the work we do together with the IMF in the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable, of which there will be another meeting next week. Now, liquidity is what you spoke to. As you know, Cote d'Ivoire and Kenya, both in recent past, were able to go back to the markets and access them and reissue debt at different prices. I think Cote d'Ivoire got a slightly better price than Kenya. So the real task is to get that price to also come down. But the good news is that the markets aren't frozen. they're able to roll over and finance debt. And I think that is a change in the last 6 to 8 months. That's a good and welcome change. Now, the reality is that if interest rates do begin to come down over the next period of time, that also will help on this situation. You got to factor all that in as we discuss the next steps on the G20 Common Framework. In general, stepping back from all this, I think the fact that many of the world's poorest countries are facing an intense debt crisis, along with the interest rate issue and weaker global growth, and including even the appreciation of foreign currencies, that's a issue. And no one can discount the seriousness of that. And I think what we are trying to do is, like I said, focus on the debt sustainability analysis, on transparency, and then on net positive flows and grant financing for all of these countries to help them through this period. You asked the question about China. I was there about a few weeks ago, and we talked a great deal about China's role in climate. We talked a great deal about China's desire to work with the world in 3 areas that I think are less controversial than the usual challenges of geopolitics bring out. And the first one of that is climate. The second one of that is actually around healthcare. In their case, a particular interest as their population ages to how to create the ability to deal with healthcare delivery for that. And third, on rural development. And while I was there, I went and visited a province and saw actual work that the World Bank had funded over the years, but also had knowledge transfer from on how they were tackling air, soil, and water pollution, not just with kind of tackling it across agriculture, transport, industry, and the rest, but also monitoring and tracking and then sending correction teams in to help fix these things with a sense of urgency. It was pretty impressive what I saw there on the work they're doing. They've got a long way to go. They're still among the largest, in fact, they're probably the largest creator of greenhouse emissions. Most of that has to do with coal and thermal power. And as you know, they've also got 30% of the world's manufacturing output, which connects to your point about overcapacity. We talked about manufacturing, but peripherally. As you know, Secretary Yellen and others have had a far deeper conversation on that with them. And I suggest you ask them about that piece.
Great, thank you. And I see
Thanks.
next we have Amy Williams from the Financial Times hand up. Amy, go ahead.
Hi there. Thanks for doing this press conference. I also have a broad climate question. Simon Steele, the UNFCCC president, yesterday said in a speech that the World Bank, the IMF, the G7 and G20 finance ministers need to step up the pace to mobilize dollars to developing countries. Curious to hear your reaction to this kind of continued comment. Do you think the World Bank can step up the pace?
Thank you. I mean, look, I announced at COP that we would get to 45% of our financing to go to climate by next year. And, we had a target earlier of 30+%, 35, and we were reaching that number. So we've kind of raised our ambition now. Honestly, I don't even know if we can go from 35 to 45 in the course of 18 months. But the objective of putting 45 out there is to show where our intention is and to drive the institution towards that intention. And even if I get to 42 or I get to 46, I'll still be much happier than being at 35 and aiming for that. That is the logic of that. And then I said half for adaptation and half for mitigation, because I think tackling climate change requires us to approach issues from both sides. Now, interestingly, the money that's going into adaptation is actually just doing development smarter for the reality of what we are facing with the impact of climate. So, heat-resistant varieties of seeds, or drip irrigation in agriculture, or managing your soil productivity better, or hurricane-resistant schools, or roads that don't get washed away every time there's a climate catastrophe, which means you can't keep economic activity going. These are kind of smart development tools that constitute the half that we're putting into adaptation. The question really is, Amy, we put in $120 billion to work last year, of which about 70-80 billion was from IDA and IBRD, to which this 45% applies. Is that going to change the reality of the work that is required in climate by itself? No. And I think that no amount of money from just multilateral banks can change this. That's not the size of these balance sheets, despite the generosity of donor countries and donors. The reality is, even with government money, you cannot change that. Look at the loss and damage fund. It's just been set up. It's not completely done. Our job there is to put together the working secretariat for that fund. And then the fund will have its own board that will decide how to raise money and how to utilize the money. We can help with technical expertise, but it's the fund and its board that will do that. Now, commitments have to come in for that. At COP time, about $700 million was committed. Clearly, we're going to need more than that. But the reality is government money and multilateral bank money alone will not get to those trillions that people talk about. And that's why the private sector is really important. So I think having a conversation that is holistic, that includes government money, includes the multilateral bank money, and includes what we need to do with the private sector will be very important. And that's why that private sector lab, and you heard me talk about the 3 or 4 things we're trying to do there. It's all part of this holistic approach. It's not easy. It's not challenging. It's going to be very challenging.
Thank you. We have time for one more, and I see next is David Lauder from Reuters. David, go ahead, please.
Hi, Ajay. Thank you for doing this. I wanted to follow up on Eric's question about China. I just got back from Secretary Yellen's trip over there, where she raised a lot of concerns about Chinese overproduction of various goods, especially clean energy goods like electric vehicles and solar panels. So I'm just wondering sort of where you view this. The Chinese argument, of course, is that their vast production capabilities will help the world meet its climate goals by producing very cheap solar panels, particularly. So just where do you come down on this? Is there a trade-off between sort of the having other countries be able to share that manufacturing capability, or is what China's doing helpful for the world?
I mean, David, first of all, thanks for asking, and I'm glad you went to China, and I hope you had a productive trip. My view about trade overall, which is where all this comes in, is that transparent trade in which the whole rules around subsidies that every fight occurs about on trade are kind of important. And I think Ngozi is the expert in this space. I'm not, but I chaired the International Chamber of Commerce in my past life, and I'm a real believer that trade contributes, but trade contributes if it's done with transparency and a level playing field. Because otherwise, merely getting a product that is cheaper but doesn't help you also to build societal capabilities, to build the right safety nets for your people, to build the right quality of life for your people, that doesn't solve. You can't solve one side of the equation. You've got to do both. And I've always believed in that. And it's not only specific to China's current issue that people are discussing. It's specific to all kinds of subsidies that come across the world. And not just in trade, but you've also heard me talk about subsidies in fuel and agriculture around the world. There's $1.5 trillion that goes into it. And people think that there's another $6 trillion a year that is the indirect cost from the harmful downstream impacts of some of these subsidies to fossil fuels and to agriculture. Honestly, when we talk about the earlier question from Amy, where do you get the money from to do some of these things? That's money that can be redirected. I don't believe that you can do it without caring for people who today are benefited from some of those subsidies for their cost of living. So, if you're getting cheaper natural gas to people to be able to cook at home as compared to coal, I think that is a good use of that subsidy. But can you redirect subsidies? The European Union took $60 billion of subsidies that used to go to farmers to use more fertilizer with all the downstream impacts of that fertilizer runoff to actually give them the same 60 billion, but now to incentivize a lower use and a smarter use of the right kind of fertilizer. I think the whole topic of subsidies, whether in trade or domestic consumption, is a topic that needs a great deal of attention from all of us.
Thank you all. And thank you, Ajay. This concludes our press conference. Just a reminder that all content of this call are embargoed until 8 a.m. DC time tomorrow, Friday, April 12, which is 1200 UTC. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. We have a busy week ahead of us next week. Hope to see all of you at the spring meetings. Thanks.